Hello and welcome to our episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. We are here in New York at the TradingTech Briefing from the 18 Group, and it's my great pleasure to have Krissy from OneChronos. Krissy, lovely to see you. How are you?
Good, how are you? Great.
Very good indeed, thanks. So, OneChronos has been on recently. Scott Bradley broke the internet when he came on to the show. It's great to have you over here as well in the US. We're here at the briefing. You're speaking a little bit later on in the panel. We're going to come on to a little bit about that first and shortly afterwards. But to kick off, let's hear a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I joined OneChronos officially a year ago as of, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. So that year has flown by.
It does, doesn't it?
But I've been a part of the team now for about a year on the business development team specifically. So sort of interdisciplinary between, distribution and sales, being client interfacing, but also speaking with the street in order to inform and help to build out product development and then analytics when those products go live and start trading. So my focus is kind of interdisciplinary in that regard. Someone asks, what does business development do at OneChronos? I jokingly say, yes. But specifically on the team, I'm focused on US equities, which is our live product as a venue within that market structure. But I'm also working very closely with core, business development, et cetera, to build out our FX product. We'll be launching a spot FX venue later on this year.
So it's all happening. I mean, when Scott came,
it's all happening at OneChronos.
It generally feels like one of, and afterwards, after that episode, I've been speaking to lots of people all across the industry, and there's a real buzz about the company at the moment. Tell us a little about. You mentioned there about moving into new products, launching into new areas. Why is it so exciting at OneChronos right now?
Well, first off, before going through ventures into new asset classes, I maybe should explain the one that's live and operable right now.
Let's go with that.
So at the moment, we operate a dark pool within US equities, a broker-dealer ATS. We, however, think of ourselves as more of a matching engine technology company. The reason being the way we facilitate trading as a venue, whether it's US equities, soon to be FX, European equities, et cetera, is a little bit different. We're not a continuous trading venue. We only allow executions during auctions that we kick off, call it 10 times a second. And where the matching engine technology component comes in really is in within that auction, how we allow matches to occur. So we are not a price time venue in allowing executions to trade on our book. Instead, our technology is in the ability to run an optimization during each of those auctions. So to run an optimization fast enough to keep up with the scale and speed of financial markets, US equities just being the first stop in that journey. And that we think is really interesting. I mean, from a performance standpoint, anecdotally, as well as, proven by our markouts, code stability, et cetera, as a venue, but also in terms of the way flow naturally interacts with our book, right? We do not curate or segment our pool of liquidity. That mechanism design, the optimization, the auction naturally yields a higher quality of liquidity and how we allow trades to be rewarded on our book. So maybe the first trade is the best trade, maybe it's not. We're able to run an optimization to decide and say within each auction, let's look across our order book and find the best matches available, which might be the first, but aren't guaranteed to be or aren't necessarily. So we look agnostic of queue priority in order to figure out what should execute on our book.
And this is where we'll come on to this in a second, because it's kind of, and I spoke to Scott about this a little bit as well, about the innovation side of it. Innovation is one of those words where you say, well, is it innovation, evolution? But you guys are doing something really different, and that's sort of got a big buzz around it. So we'll come on to why you're talking about that on the panel and what that means a little bit later on. But I want to dive into your background a little bit, because it's not necessarily the most traditional.
You could say that, or directly applicable as you might think.
Tell us a little bit about it, because I love that, because it's been an industry that's been closed off and sort of one route for ages. It's always been a certain way of thinking, a certain way of hiring, a certain way of developing people through an industry. And I love it when I see people coming from a slightly different angle, giving a different sort of viewpoint of how things come through. Tell us a little bit more about yours.
Yeah, classic entrance to finance. I was applied math with math bio research on hooping cranes, contemplating pastry before that, and somewhere along the way dipped my toe in potentially venturing into social work. So really, maybe not the most typical entrance into finance, but I think whether it's US equities, European equities, FX, regardless of the asset class, in general, our society is moving to become more electronic, more more automated. And I think that has, in some ways, maybe created more barriers to entry, but in others really removed them and created this new regime of competition and accessibility. So as it pertains to FX or US equities, the market to be moving to become more electronic has allowed new venues to pop up where the way that they differentiate maybe isn't a function of the relationships they have so much as their differentiation being in the mechanism that they use to facilitate trading and how that yields higher performance. And so that is a way to almost democratize access for certain of these venues, and also I think opens the door to new profiles in terms of personnel that enter the market, right? Maybe because it's more electronic, more systematic, there's a natural lean towards having more STEM-focused people in the industry as opposed to traditional finance. And in addition, those STEM-focused people, it doesn't have to be financial mathematics, right? Mine was math bio on foraging behavior of whooping cranes and epidemiology. One of them eventually became relevant in my life, yeah, but not necessarily as it pertains to my career specifically. But it's less so about the specific concentration or application of those areas of discipline or academic vigor, more so the skill set you gain in pursuing those areas, engineering style fields. And so new innovations moving to become more electronic, it really has paved the way for really high quality people with diversity of backgrounds, and that is what provides an edge to a company, is that diversity in thought.
And it's an interesting thing about that business, your business, because it's got sort of some of those very traditional sort of backgrounds in there combined with sort of you know, a different sort of thing. And that's, you know, when we come back to talking about evolution, we come back to talk about innovation within the space, that's quite an interesting mix to create that sort of thinking, isn't it? Because I've long lamented the fact that this industry can be very conservative for obvious reasons, and it has potentially lacked a little bit of the innovation that we've seen outside of the industry at various different stages, particularly when embracing new technologies. But what I think what's exciting about where you're coming from is it is looking at things in different angles with different viewpoints. So when you're up there on the panel later on today, tell me a little bit about the viewpoint, the standpoint that you guys are taking. What do you want people to be hearing when they're through there? I know it's Chatham House once we're in there, but before you saying it doesn't count, does it? So tell us a little bit about.
Sure, we can go with those rules for now.
Tell us some of the takeaways that you're taking.
So my topic, the discussion that our panel is going to be having, is really around venue innovation across asset classes. So not necessarily specific to US equities, but I'm sure that'll be a part of the discussion. Spoiler alert. I think to your point around diversity of background being interesting or a contributing factor to evolution markets, I think that's so true, and even from within the market in terms of the interplay across asset classes, their structure, and how we can learn from them. So as an example, and some topics that we'll be discussing about today in terms of venue innovation really has to do with the interdisciplinary nature that we see, you know, whether it's US equities, FX, fixed income, US equities, et cetera, and the ability to kind of pull from what you're seeing happening in one market structure to inform what you're doing in another. So one example of that might be US equity landscape, right? It has over the past 10 years become increasingly more OTC, days where we have more volume executed off exchange than on exchange. What is our market right now, if not fragmented? More than a dozen exchanges, 3 dozen-ish ATSs, SDPs, single dealer platforms, hosted books, lions, tigers, bears, So US equities has become increasingly more fragmented, feeling like almost every day. How do we navigate that new structure in the market? Well, maybe instead of reinventing the wheel, we can pull from FX. FX market structure is hyper fragmented. So I think there's synergies in strategy, in infrastructure that really can be seen across asset classes, which is a part of why we're venturing out of US equities into FX, into European equities, et cetera. Our stance is that, that tech, that infrastructure, these auctions, the optimization, all of it is homogenous across asset classes. Regulatory environments are maybe different, and we'll abide by those, of course. But overall, the ethos, the motivation is the same, which is mitigate market impact, maximize the ability to achieve price improvement. That is something that's asset class agnostic.
Yeah.
So I agree, that diversity in background, whether it be outside of finance or even within financial markets from different asset classes, can be super synergistic, but in a really positive way. That word sometimes has a negative connotation.
I know exactly what you mean, and I love the fact you sort of talked about the purpose behind it there, saying, look, is everything you're doing functioning back to what the objective is for what you are as a business? And once you can weave that into the narrative of what you're talking about, it makes everything else easier. And once you've got brilliant minds there looking at it from different areas, that generally comes up with solutions that are getting some hype around the marketplace, hearing people talking about it, and getting the traction that you're getting so far to do things. And it feels like it's just the beginning at the moment, right?
Yeah, I certainly hope so, and we think so. But very true, that idea of having an objective common across asset classes, right? It's true metaphysically in everything that we're discussing right now, but also when you get down to how we facilitate trading as a venue, there's an objective and there's an optimization run to try and meet that objective within each and every auction that we facilitate.
So it's going to be an exciting conversation up there later on.
I think so. I may be biased, but I think
there's a lot of
so.
buzz. Everyone's talking.
Yeah.
So let's finish by talking about the business and what we can expect to see. We're more or less exactly halfway through the year as we're talking today. Tell us what we can expect. What's exciting for the rest of this year? What can we expect to see here?
So over the next couple months, we'll be standing up our Spot FX venue, which we think will be really interesting. This auction-style framework optimization really is going to be the first of its kind in that market structure, and we think it'll therefore be disruptive in a lot of beneficial ways in terms of not requiring segmentation or that counterparty curation we referenced before in order to achieve a certain performance outcome. What if instead of hyper-curating flow post-trade when you look at analytics of a counterparty and their markout profile, et cetera, what if instead of that sort of post-trade band-aid, there's a pre-trade fix and we just change the mechanism of how we allow trades to occur on our book. So entering into Spot FX, I think will be really, really exciting. That'll happen over the next couple of months. And then pending regulatory approval, we'll also be launching 2 MTFs, post-Brexit kind of a requirement, so that we can get into the European equity space. So both of those are really exciting for us. We have our eyes set on other asset classes as well to potentially get into, but for the year we'll focus on those.
Yeah, we're running out of runway for this year.
Right.
26 and beyond looks very exciting. Listen, it's been wonderful meeting you today. Thanks so much for coming onto the show. Thanks for sharing. I look forward to if I can sneak out and listen to some a little bit later on. I'll come and give you all the support we can give you. But Krissy, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.